He was pressured into doing things at the end. And there were things that he did, and you have to know about those. Okay? And this is the short list. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to explain these things. Now, before I do that, however, I want to go back a slide, because I don't know how much we went through the Venn diagram last class. Oops. Did we go over this? Okay. I want to specifically talk about just a couple things on this side. All right. Those things we're going to see the decimal stuff later. But this one I'm going to talk about specifically. So many people, as you know, I was saying that even in some cases there's 60% unemployment in certain cities in the United States. It's very, very, very high. Okay. And so soup kitchens and bread lines were just a part of people's everyday lives. What's ironic, or I don't know if it's ironic or moronic, depends on how you want to look at it, Herbert Hoover would drive around in his limousine, his open-air limousine, going through these shanty towns. Now, who can tell me what a shanty town is? It's like, how many people have ever seen the movie Slumdog Millionaires? Okay, if you haven't seen that movie, how many people have ever seen a movie where, like, on the outskirts of a town, there's like, people are living in these really ramshackle shacks with like metal roofs, and you know what I'm talking about? Okay, that would be considered like a shanty town. They don't have real dwellings, they're just kind of makeshift, you know? And this happened during the 1930s as well, during the Great Depression. Well, Hoover would be riding around in his limousine while all these people were, you know, not eating and not living well and stuff like that. And people really had a distaste for that because, I mean, it's obvious, right? So there were certain things that they did to, you know, say their disapproval of Hoover at the time. For instance, I'll give you an example. So I'm gonna pull my pocket out here. Okay. Do you know what this was? So people walk around with their pockets out like this. All right. It's a Hoover flag. Do you get it? Okay. What's in my pocket right now? Lint or nothing. Okay. They would have political cartoons. You know. I mean, all those things, and you want to look those things up so that you're familiar with, you know, the politics during the time period. Okay. So all kinds of things were going on that were, you know, people were disapproving of what was going on. The fact that the government was not helping. But remember, he had that whole hands-off attitude that the government should not help people get off their feet. Okay? FDR is the exact opposite. Okay? But because of pressure, he, you know, if he wanted to ever get reelected or whatever, he had to start doing something. So, what did he do? Or what is his presidency, I should say. Okay, so in this slide, the first one I kind of consider more of a suggestion. All right, so he urged businesses, okay, banking, labor leaders not to cut wages or lay off workers. What does that mean? He urged them. Is he forcing them? No, he's asking them, hey, can you guys do this so we can maybe, you know, stabilize our economy a little bit? You know, they also asked during this time period, even during, you know, FDR's time period, that the unions not strike. And, you know, so there was some kind of a kibosh put on unions during this time period. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay? But, you know, this is, I mean, you can ask all you want. Does that mean people are going to do what you want? No. No, I asked you guys to do your homework. Do you always do it?
Yes.
Okay, some of you do. All right, so cautious approach would help prevent making matters worse, but the economy still, you know, continued to shrink. All right. All right, one of his big wins, we know it as the Hoover Dam, but originally it was called the Boulder Dam. Where's Boulder? What state? Colorado. Okay. How many people have ever been to Las Vegas? Okay, you should go. It's fun. However, Las Vegas, now you've seen it on TV, lots of lights. Lights take a lot of what? Electricity, right? Guess what that's being powered from? Hoover Dam, which is part of the Grand Canyon, which is part of the Colorado River. However, because they're using so much power, they have blackouts, the water's running out because of just, you know, I don't know, you can call it global warming, whatever you want to call it, but there's a lot of issues now because of that. But during this time period, these kinds of projects, okay, I liked these kinds because they were good for the common good. Do you know what that is?
For the people.
It benefits everyone. Okay, so how did it benefit everyone? So let's break it down. So you're gaining money from the sale. So first of all, you have to build the dam, right? Is that going to take people?
Yeah.
So it take a lot of people. It's a huge undertaking to build a dam. That's a big project. So you can put people to work. Good stuff. People to work. They're going to make wages, and they're going to be able to get on their feet, right? Also, not only that, once it's built, it's going to provide electricity for the people in that area. Okay, it's actually quite a big area. They're going to gain money from the sale of electricity as well. So not only is electricity being produced, but you got to pay for it, right? And also, it's going to provide water to nearby cities for agriculture. You know, so they created irrigation because when you build a dam, it also stops soil erosion. And so from that point, they also were able to build irrigation to nearby farms and for agriculture. So earlier today, somebody was talking about they couldn't find agricultural subsidies. An agricultural subsidy is where the government is going to give money to farmers so that they can stabilize their crop prices, which we'll get to right now, okay? So that's what a subsidy is. A government's, it's kind of like government welfare in a way to businesses, but specific businesses, okay? Now, so that was good. That was a success. FDR is going to do something similar. He's not going to do it himself, but he's going to do something called the TVA. We'll talk about that later too. The Tennessee Valley Authority. It's the Hoover Dam in Tennessee. Same thing. Okay? So that area is going to have a boost in their economy as well. All right? The Federal Farm Board. What's a board? What's a board do? What's that? It's a group of people that are like a committee that make decisions on things, like our school board, right? They're going to make decisions on the future of our school, the financial aspects of our school, the curriculum. Okay, but there's going to be people, you know, under them running the show. They're going to make the big decisions. Well, the Federal Farm Board was put into place to help those farmers. We said that the farmers went into foreclosure. Remember that? Well, is there a way that we can make it so that they don't? Well, they raise farm prices by helping members buy crops and keep them off the market until prices rose. So the farm board made it so that, okay, so let's say I have, you know, a bunch of grain and it fills up this room, and I overproduced, and so normally, you know, to feed us, it only takes us half the room. Well, instead of flooding the market with all the grain, I'm going to hold back part of my crop so that, and I'm only going to release so much to the public so that the prices go back up. Does this make sense? Okay. In some cases during the Great Depression, if I remember correctly, it was during FDR, they actually, I'm not really for this, but they actually burned like product and crops to get rid of them to make the prices go up. Now to me that's kind of like an oxymoron. However, because people weren't eating, right? But you had to stabilize the economy somehow. That was one of the ways they would do it. Okay? So that was the Federal Farm Board. Then you have the Federal Home Loan Bank Act. Okay? Now, if you look at the names of these SRFs, okay, you can figure out what, for the most part, they do. The Federal Farm Board is going to deal with farms. The Federal Home Loan Bank Act is going to deal with the mess that was going on with the banks. So they lowered mortgage rates and allowed farmers to refinance or avoid foreclosure. Now I'll give you an example. This happened in the last 6-7 years. Okay? They were giving these bad loans out. People were buying. It wasn't the people's fault. It was the banks and the mortgage companies that were doing this, and the real estate people. And they were giving out loans that people couldn't afford. And so when they fell on their face and the economy went down, the bank was left with the houses. And people were foreclosing on their houses. Banks don't want houses. Yeah.
I just remembered something. When you were talking about the Hoover flag,
With what?
the Hoover flag, about your
Yeah.
pocket. When the families would eat like stray dogs or cats or like rats that they would find, when they would be asked about it, they said that they were eating Hoover pigs for dinner.
Hoover pigs, yes. Did you guys hear that? So if there were stray cats and dogs and they were hungry, they would eat them and they would call them Hoover pigs. Yeah. Do what you gotta do to survive, right? Nowadays, you know, we probably think that's kind of crazy. But hey, if it ever got to that point again, you know. Okay, so historically, in the last 2 years, interest rates have been the lowest they've ever been. Like depends on your credit rating. It was like 3.5. I mean, that's super low. Now, you're like, so what? What does that mean? This is what it means. Also, they were lowering interest rates. I'm sorry, they were lowering mortgage rates. So if people were out there right now were going to foreclose, and this bothers me a little bit because I've been paying my mortgage the whole time, right? But these people that were going to foreclose, they said, okay, instead of foreclosing on the house, they then went back to the people and said, okay, instead of paying $1,600 a month, you can afford $1,200. We'll take $1,200 until we get back to where we need to be. So they lowered their monthly rate so that they wouldn't foreclose on the house and the bank would own it. So at least they're getting some of their money and they'll stabilize the system. Okay? Second, here's the deal. If I have $100,000, if I want to buy a $100,000 house, okay, usually it's over 30 years. It's safer. It's less interest, right? Not really. I mean, so let's say the mortgage was $100,000 and it was 10% of $100,000 over 30 years. Okay, let's do some simple math here. Simple math. I know some of you guys are in AP. So it's $10,000 a year times how many years? 30 years. What's 30 times 10,000? 300,000. So really, after 30 years, how much are you paying for that house? 400,000. But the mortgage was for 100,000. Now the interest rates are 5%. Is it better for you in the long run? Absolutely. You're not going to be paying the bank all that interest money. That's how banks make money. So interest rates got down so low, people were refinancing their houses so that they wouldn't have to pay that crazy amount when they finally finished paying their house payment. Okay? So that's another trick that they do. Okay? And they're starting to go back up now because have you noticed? You ever hear that on TV? Buy now. Get your home loans now because interest rates will never be this low again. Have you ever heard that? Watch your commercials. Okay? All right. So the last one is called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. Reconstruction. What does that mean?
Making it again.
Yeah, make it again. Rebuilding something that was broke or broken down or tore down or whatever. So the government authorized $2 billion. It's a lot of money back then. $2 billion. Emergency financing for banks, life insurance companies, railroads, and other big businesses. Because if those businesses fall, what I tell you about the Dow Jones, they all go down because they employ so many people. Okay? So Hoover did do some things. He just kind of waited too long. Okay? Questions? All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a story. Tell you a story. You guys ready for a story?
Yep.
Next story is right. Okay.
Mr. Bellows.
Yes.
Oh, do you want me to record this?
Yeah. Just
Okay.
keep going. It's fine. Because it relates. It relates to what we're talking about. Okay. So I was driving down the street one day and I saw this horrible accident. This guy had ran into a tree. Ambulance was there, the whole shebang, you know. Obviously it was something really major, you know. And pretty much wrapped his car around a tree. Come to find out later that the guy survived, did not hit anybody, did not hit, you know, nobody else was in the car, so the only person that was injured was this guy. But they got him to the hospital and he was pronounced dead. So when you get to the hospital, or if you die en route or whatever, what do they do?
Take your own son.
What do they do?
I don't know, but they take, if you're an organ donor, they take your.
Okay, if you die and you just like stop breathing, what do?
They try to
CPR, or they do the paddles, boom, right? Get your boom, man. All right, so they gotta get you breathing again, because the whole point is to save you, right? So they get him in there and they get that guy breathing again, finally. Okay, and then once the person's breathing, they have to stabilize them. Have you ever heard these terms before? So they're in critical condition, now they're going to be, okay. So they're going to go into a period where they're going to stay in the hospital until they get healthier. They might even have to do rehabilitation. I mean, it depends on what happened, broken bones, all that stuff, right? So, you know, what's that time period between like when they revived you to when you leave the hospital? Anybody know? And what's it called? I'll tell you, it's called recovery. Now you can do that at home as well, but a lot of times you're going to recover in the hospital, so you know that you're okay. So when you go home, you can do some more recovery. But here's the thing: after this guy recovered and did his therapy and all those things, he wasn't done at that point when he left the hospital. He had to go to some meetings. And what meetings did he have to go to?
Alcoholics Anonymous.
He had to go to AA.
Yeah.
What's AA?
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Alcoholics Anonymous. Why would he have to go to AA?
Because he was drunk driving.
Because when he was hitting the tree, he was drunk. Okay, and he could have, killed other people and stuff like that. By the way, I made that story up. Not to say that this couldn't happen for real, but the reason I'm telling you is I want you to take that story and you're going to relate it to what FDR did. Okay? They're called the 3 R's. So today, you are going to describe, when you leave, you should be able to describe FDR's 3 R's and an example of each. And that's what we're going to do right now. So, actually, one of the worksheets that you grabbed up here, I think it actually talks about the 3 R's, but I'm going to do it my own way. So, I'm going to write on the board, and it's going to be beautiful like always. Right? Refer to my old book, because it's really good too. And, okay, so. Okay, so here's what I'm doing. I'm going to talk about the 3 R's, and I'm going to give you the gist of the New Deal. Okay? The New Deal is FDR's plan to get us out of the Great Depression. It was very robust. So I'm gonna talk about the 3 R's. I'll give you some stories, and then I'll kind of step back and go from the beginning and tell you exactly what he did, what his plan was. You have to have a plan. You can't, it's like you play any sports, you got to have some kind of plan. I mean, you can go out there and be the best team in the world, but if you don't have a good plan, the other team's going to beat you. So, right on the board, so hopefully you guys can understand it. So, in order to get the guy that was in the hospital breathing again, okay, in this particular case, you're going to have the 3 R's, okay? Remember, we're talking about FDR here now. FDR is going to be president. Okay, so he got elected. The first one is called relief. Okay? So you got to get the guy breathing before he can do anything, right? I mean, you got to bring him back to life before he can work or do anything else. Second one is recovery. Got to spend some time in the hospital to get better so that you can go back to real life outside of the hospital. And the last one is called reform. Reform, with the guy that we were just talking about, has to do with AA. We need to make it so he's not going to be drinking and driving anymore, so he doesn't not only hurt himself, but hurt anybody else as well. Reform is changing what was broke. I mean, reform in the general sense is change, right? In this case, we're going to talk about how do we make it so that this never happens again in our economy. Now, that's impossible to predict and to plan for. However, you could be more active than maybe what Hoover did. So, when we're talking about the actual New Deal, there's going to be different things. So the first thing you have to do, all right, what do you need to survive?
Food.
You need food and water, right? If you don't have food and water, are you going to be weak?
Yes.
If you're weak, are you going to be able to work hard?
No.
No. So what do I have to do first? I have to give you sustenance. I have to give you some protein. I have to give you some kind of food so that you can actually go work and be useful, right? So the first one with relief, the government, okay, gave money to the states, okay, basically for a couple different reasons. I'm going to erase this in a minute, but, you know, to feed people, okay. Now churches and stuff do this as well. Feed people, you know, you got your soup kitchens and bread lines, whatever, all right? So some of this was being done on a volunteer basis as well. But the government's going to give the states a certain amount of money so that people they can survive. So first of all, we got to survive. Can't start working until you survive. All right? So that's going to be the first stage. In this particular stage, okay, there's several acronyms. Now, the New Deal is full of acronyms. There was tons of different committees and so forth that were created to get people back to work. Did I tell, I don't know if it was your class or first hour, did I tell you about my grandfather being rich and being at the end of the bank line? Okay, so what did he do after he lost all of his money in the Great Depression and in the banks?
Started working.
He had to work in one of these government programs. So I'm going to tell you a couple of them right now. One of them was called the CCC. Does anyone know what that means? The CCC. It was the Civil Conservation Corps. This isn't exactly the one that he worked in, but the Civil Conservation Corps. And I like a lot of these because they were doing that whole common good thing where they were doing things that were benefiting not only themselves, the government, but the country, you know. CCC was like men, usually single men from 18 to 25, and they would go out and they would do road work, and they would work in the national forest, and they would do things that were like that. Does that make sense? So it says, you know, more than 300,000 young men between ages 18 and 25 were at work planting trees, setting up fire breaks, and building dams to stop soil erosion. So, I hate to use the word manly work, but that kind of fit that, all right? Another one was called FERA, the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, okay, F-E-R-A, FERA, okay? And it says Congress set aside $500 million for FERA to hand out in direct relief to states, cities, and towns. So remember I was telling you, that was the one that was feeding people. You ever heard of FEMA? You guys remember when the hurricane hit the south? FEMA went down there and it was all a mess. Yeah, that's kind of like what FERA was back then. They probably just changed the name. Another one was the Civil Works Administration, the CWA. Guys, what's this look like, by the way? Does it look like a paper? Doesn't it? I mean, you could write a paper like this. Here's your 3 SRFs. There's your topic for your first paragraph, whatever. You know, I mean, you could easily write a paper on this. Civil Works Administration. Let's see here. Hold on a second. Which took over many of the functions of FERA, and they built roads, parks, schools, airports, etc. Okay. There was another one. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah, Public Works. Oh, that's recovery. Okay. So those are some of the relief programs that were put into place. Now you get down to recovery. Now you're putting people back to work to get the economy going again. So here we just, you know what I mean? We got to get people just surviving and stuff like that. Now we got to get the economy going again, and then we're going to fix things. So in this particular one, in recovery, there's a bunch of them. I'll just give you a couple. Public Works Administration. These were large-scale engineering projects such as highways, bridges, power plants, etc. Working on the Hoover Dam was part of that as well. Tennessee Authority. So you've got PWA, Public Works. What's it called when people, come by and they get your recycling, your garbage, and stuff like that? in your city? That's Public Works. Did you know that? So those guys that work for the city, that's Public Works. All right? And a lot of the things that they were building back then, even some of the schools, not so much anymore, but a lot of the schools that were built in the United States were from that time period. The TVA, which I talked about, Tennessee Valley Authority, that's going to put a bunch of people to work in Tennessee building, electricity and dams, or a dam, I should say. There's different areas of the recovery. So there's agricultural recovery, there's business recovery, stuff like that. There's the Homeowners Loan Corporation. All right, I'm not going to write that one down, but you should, read your book. There's the AAA. And this is one that is going to come back to haunt FDR because they started setting prices for farm products and so forth, and
Unconstitutional.
it went against the Constitution. So there were things that FDR did that a lot of people didn't like, So that's a key one right there. But the whole purpose of it was to help farmers, okay? And they didn't want them to foreclose.
Mr. Bello?
Yeah, hold on one second. Okay, yes.
Would the Social Security Act would be recovered?
Social Security, all right, I want you to forget about Social Security right now because that's going to be in the second New Deal. So all these things I'm talking about are in the first 100 days of FDR's presidency, and that's going to come later. So I don't want you to confuse the two because there's two sets of programs, and that's in the second set. We'll talk about that one maybe tomorrow or whatever, okay? All right. And then lastly, now guys, there's other programs you can put in here. Let's get to the reform. Yeah, there's also industrial recovery, the National Recovery Administration, the NRA, not the gun people. That one was put into place here as well, the NRA. Okay? Now, in the reform area, there's a couple that I'm going to talk about. What were some of the reasons that the stock market crashed? Huh? Say it again? Okay, now, well, not so much with the stock market in particular. That was a general cause, with the farmers and stuff like that. Well, why the stock market?
Was it called merger? I don't know. People
Alright.
borrowing money to buy stock?
Okay, they were buying on margin. Remember the stock pools and speculation, and it kept those false prices going up and it burst? Okay, that's because they were doing illegal. It wasn't illegal at the time, but now it's illegal. So they were doing things in the stock market that they should not have been doing. It wasn't good practice. So there was an act that was created during this time period. It was called the Glass-Steagall Act. And the Glass-Steagall Act created two things, okay? One of them, I just want to make sure I write this down correct. Yeah, the Securities Act, okay. Okay, this one, okay. Now, I was telling you that my grandfather was last in line and he didn't get his money back. If you guys go put your money in the bank, it's guaranteed. I mean, it could catch on fire, somebody could steal it, whatever, you're going to get your money back. It's insured now. And so, I'll explain this when I get to, after I'm done with this, I'm gonna go back to the beginning and tell you how this works. But when you go to your banks now and you put money in there, it's Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. That means that your money, any money that you put in the bank, is going to be, it's going to be insured up to a certain point. It used to be like, I want to say it was like 10 grand or something, I don't remember, but now it's like 100,000. So if you have $1 million, what do?
Made 10 bank.
You put your money in 10 different banks, right? Okay. All right. Anyway, so your money. So the Glass-Steagall, they needed people to put money back in the bank, and now there's going to be a reason to do that. And the second one was called the Securities Act, which created the SEC. And the SEC is the Security and Exchange Commission. The Security and Exchange Commission, they're like the police for the stock market. Has anyone seen the recent movie? It's really bad though. The Wolf of Wall Street?
Yeah, I watched it.
Okay, yeah, you watch that movie?
It's really good.
They were doing illegal stuff. like a lot of it. And people were getting like their money taken from them, their life savings.
That's genius, though.
Well, and he got away with it for most of it.
Yeah.
Actually, he did get away with
He
the
did
jail.
get away.
But anyway, so guys, you see, so the New Deal is going to be basically a series of programs from 32 to, when World War II starts, to get us out of the Great Depression. Now, some people thought this was too much government control. And in some cases, I can see that. But somebody had to do something. And this is one of the reasons that FDR is considered or ranked one of the highest presidents, in different surveys and stuff like that. Because, well, I mean, he did a lot. He was president for 3.5 terms, Okay, any questions on this? Time for you guys to get it? 45, okay. Now, let's go back. This is when FDR started. So how did we get to this point? Okay, so FDR is going to, is he going to make it? FDR is going to become elected in a landslide election in 1932. Okay, in 1932, here's what he does. It's brilliant, if you ask me. He gets into the presidency. He already said, he has a plan. He wants to institute it, and you know how we have a meeting of the minds? Okay, that's exactly what he did. He got all of the smartest people around the United States to come to Washington. He basically locked them in a room for like a week and said, "Come up with solutions." I love it. Yeah. History, it could have been history teachers, economic people, people in business, experts that were the best of the best. Put them all in a room. It's a brainchild. There's a word for it, a think tank. Okay, and all these things came out of that. So not only did he do that, the first act that he did was it was called a bank holiday. So remember I was telling you the banks weren't viable? So he says, okay, we're closing all the banks for a week. Closing all the banks.
4 days.
And, for a week.
It was 4 days.
Whatever. Okay? We're going to say a week. And he closes the banks, and what they did was they looked at all the banks to see which ones were solvent. Which ones were good and in good running, and which ones weren't. And the ones that weren't, they closed. And the ones that were really good and had good practices, they kept open. And then he does what he was really famous for, and this is what started it. He goes on to the radio. He goes on to the radio, and he gives his first fireside chat. Okay? Now, remember, the radio is somewhat of a new invention or whatever, but people, by this time, a lot of people have the radio. So this is a way for him to communicate. And he goes on there, and he basically talks to the people like he's their father, and he says, listen, he goes, we looked at all the banks. We only opened the banks that were still the good ones. I need you as the American people to go out and put your money in the banks. Because if you don't do that, our economy is not going to get going again. What do you think people did? They listened, because back then they would listen to their presidents, and they would actually, they wouldn't turn a channel like you guys do. They went out and they put their money in the banks. Because now, the banks are going to be, your money's going to be secure. Okay, it's going to be backed up. You're going to get it back. No matter what. Okay? And so, that's how it all started. So you got together, like I said, you had a think tank, got everybody together. They came up with all these solutions, and they put them into place. And some of them worked really well, and some of them didn't. But like I said, when we get to the second New Deal, that's when they're going to start kind of going after some of these programs, saying that he has too much power, and he does some things that are kind of shady as well. All right, any questions? Okay, that's all I have for today. You sure you guys don't have any questions?
Mr. Bells,
Yes.
we should watch Wolf on Wall Street.